You're listening to the Uncensored Direct Marketing Show. This show is designed for direct response marketers who want raw, unfiltered conversion tips and secrets to scale their offers profitably to reach their next million. I'm Maria Sparagis. I'm the founder of Direct Painted and your host. Now let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Uncensored Direct Marketing. As I've done for a couple of weeks in the past, I'm going to be recording shorter episodes that essentially just give you quick tidbits of information that you can use to make some changes onto your processing and save some money and obviously convert more sales. So I'd really like to know your feedback on these types of episodes. And if you have any questions or any burning issues that you'd like me to answer, so please comment below. And if you do like the content, then please share, like this episode, and subscribe to the channel so you can get more content. So today's episode, we're going to be focusing on the checkout page. So regardless of whether you're using Stripe or if you have your own checkout page with your own merchant accounts, a lot of these are going to be applicable for both, but they will be applicable a little bit more if you have your own checkout page that you host yourself versus a hosted form like the one that Stripe offers. But still, there's still some tips here that you can use that can help you convert more sales and save a couple of bucks. So a few things on your checkout page that you should be doing. These are little things that you can do to avoid sending unnecessary transactions to your processor. The goal of that is twofold. First, the less bad transactions you send to your processor, the less fees you're going to be paying for transactions that are going to be declined. So, you save some money there. Secondly, if you do send a lot of bad transactions, when I say bad transactions, I mean transactions that eventually will decline or are stolen cards and so forth, the more your processor will scrub your transactions. Scrubbing means when a transaction comes in, if it looks like it's missing information or something doesn't make sense, or if it seems risky, they have different algorithms for that. I won't get too into that, but they have different algorithms to determine if a transaction is risky, they score it. And if you have a tendency of sending a lot of declines, you might start getting scrubbed and losing more transactions unnecessarily. So it is a really good idea to have some checks on your checkout page that prevents your processor of forgetting all of these quote unquote bad transactions or decline transactions. One way you can do that is by adding a Luhn algorithm check. So the Luhn algorithm, that's Luhn algorithm, is essentially to check if a card is valid. So if it's actually a card number that exists, it's an algorithm that determines credit card numbers. So if you just do the Luhn algorithm check on your checkout page as somebody's inputting their card number, well, that will really help, if somebody's mistyping their account or whatever, it'll say invalid card number. And that prevents you from sending the transaction over to the processor just to get a decline. And then the customer may not even know why it's being declined. They may have not noticed that they didn't put in the correct card information. So that's really, really important. Another thing that you can do is use your gateway fraud check. So most gateways, whether you're working with NMI, Authorize.net, or any of the bigger gateways, they have fraud checks that they can do. These are usually pretty basic, but still, it's worth a check just to go in there and see what they have and what makes sense for your business model. For example, you might have, a subscription or something like that. And you can say, each card number technically should only be charged 3 times a month. So if somebody tries 4 or 10 times or whatever, that could be obvious fraud. You could also say that after 2 declines, you do not want to send that transaction over to the processor. So if somebody just keeps trying the same card over and over and over again, it'll get stopped at the gateway level, and it avoids you getting a transaction fee from your processor, a transaction fee from your gateway, and then eventually having potential scrubbing issues, as I mentioned earlier, with your processor. Another thing that's very interesting is, if you have a product that refunds quite often, or, money back guarantee, where people ask for refunds often because they try the product, or they, especially for digital products, you give them, somebody logs in, sees that they don't like the content, they want their money back. You do have a window where you can void a transaction instead of refund it. It's a much better option because then you don't pay the percentage discount fee. So for example, if you void a transaction with Stripe, instead of refunding it, you won't pay that 2.9%. So it kind of, it negates that process. So there is a way of voiding transactions within a gateway, and you should learn how to do that and make sure that you tell your customer service agents to void if possible. Usually you can void within the same day that a transaction occurs. Another popular service, recently is for merchants who have subscriptions. It's called a decline salvage. So meaning when you have subscriptions and people decline, there's companies out there that take your declines and try to salvage the transactions. So again, the problem with that could be twofold. One is that you're sending a ton of bad transactions to your processor. So you might have scrubbing later on because they may, trust your transactions less. Secondly, you are paying transaction fees for every single transaction that you're sending through. So you're getting likely a gateway fee plus a transaction fee at your processor level. And some of these companies are a little bit relentless. They'll try 10, 12, 13 times when somebody's declined their subscription, because they take a percentage of what they recover for you. But then it just adds these insane amounts of costs for transaction fees. So if you do use a decline salvage service, or if you want to attempt to salvage some of your declined subscriptions, then kind of take a look at what's happening and see how it makes sense, how many times you should try. Typically, I advise not trying more than 3 extra times. Like you try the time that it's supposed to, then you could try a couple of days later. It's also a good idea to try at the beginning of the month. A lot of people kind of pay their bills and take care of things at the end of the month. They might have more money at the beginning of the month. And then you might want to try one more time, but 2 or 3 times really at most. There's really no need to try a card 10 times. And soon enough, Visa and MasterCard will likely have some regulations to avoid merchants abusing this type of thing where they're just hitting up a card constantly. So you might as well kind of clean up that process as soon as you can. In terms of and that's, things that you can do on your checkout page specifically. In terms of converting more sales and just, using different tricks to, once somebody comes into your funnel, to make sure that they end up being able to buy, is separate the card number as a client is inputting it. So especially for older demographics, a credit card number is usually 16 digits. If they're all kind of stuck together and, somebody whose vision maybe isn't that good, they might get mixed up. They may forget a digit. So as you're typing it in the field where, the credit card is input, you can just put a space in between every 4 characters. And that way it's just a lot easier for them. And it looks like it looks on their credit card versus just one long 16-digit number. So keep that in mind, especially if you have an older demographic. It can make a really big difference. Consider a shorter checkout for your mobile checkout page. So especially if you're selling a digital product or you have a content-based business, you don't really need to collect people's addresses. You don't really need to collect their phone numbers and so forth. So it doesn't really make much sense. And when I say for mobile, I mean, if somebody's on their desktop, and this is something that you should test, of course, but on their desktop, a lot of people have autofills and so forth. Even on mobile, they have autofills. It's just they have a lot less space to see things, so they have to scroll longer. But in general, when we've done testing on a desktop or a laptop type page, it usually doesn't have a huge impact. But on mobile, if you make your checkout page shorter, you convert more. So you might want to just, for example, collect zip code and not the full address, so that could be something. I understand that now, collecting more customer information is very valuable. So you have to kind of balance your conversions versus collecting the information and what could be more valuable for you. But it is something to consider, is on mobiles, a shorter checkout page will convert better for you. When I was talking about zip code, you can collect all the information for the address, but then just do a partial match, meaning just match up the zip code with the customer's address. The reason that I say that is if you do a full street and zip match, if somebody's address, for example, is 2515 First Avenue, on their credit card statement, it might be spelled out as FIRST Ave, and they may write it as number 1 ST Avenue. And if you do a full AVS check, which is an address verification check to match the street and the zip, that will get declined, even though it's the same thing technically. It's just the customer, may have just a different way of spelling it than USPS has it registered or whatever the case is. So a partial zip code match is usually acceptable for AVS, and it will, help you convert more sales without a huge increase in risk. Usually, if somebody knows the zip code, it's legit. Another thing is to offer DCC. DCC is dynamic currency conversion, or the local currency, if it's possible. On Stripe, you could activate dynamic currency conversion. And that way, if you're a merchant in the US and somebody from the UK buys from you, they will be presented the equivalent in pounds. That converts a lot better because people like to pay in their own currency and they don't want to have foreign exchange fees or not know what price they're going to be charged. So it will increase your conversions. It'll be a lot, a much better checkout experience for your customers. If you have a market, a specific market, like for example, you're in the US, but you get 20% of your volume in the UK and it's a considerable amount of money, then you might want to just set up a merchant account in that currency. The reason for that is obviously you can price test in that currency. You can make the price a little bit higher, a little bit lower, depending on the market. And you can also settle in that currency. So you can take advantage of, FX rates that are a little bit better. Usually when you do DCC, and for example, in Stripe's case, they accept pounds for you, they will settle in US dollars. They're going to do the conversion for you and send it to you. So, DCC is at a minimum. Local currency is when you're starting to scale in a different market. If you're working with Stripe, you can turn it on. If you're working with a merchant processor, then you can just ask them what options they have for international sales. A lot of them have different plugins or different solutions for them. For example, Direct Paynet, we offer something called Planet Payment, where it's kind of just like an additional plugin. You fill out one sheet, you tell us what you're looking for. Like, for example, if you're looking for pounds and Brazilian reals and all these different currencies, we can add them for you. And it's a very quick and easy setup. Another very underestimated and kind of it takes a little bit of dev time, but it's definitely worth it, is to give your customers the correct decline message. Why are they being declined? As I said earlier, if you have an older demographic and the person is just putting in an invalid card number, it's a good idea to tell them, hey, this is not a valid card. Do you want to check the number and try again? Now, if somebody has insufficient funds, it's a good idea to tell them, again, you have insufficient funds, try another card. If somebody's bank is declining the transaction for an unknown reason, which is, those pesky issuing bank declines, they're just these random declines that, merchants are accustomed to seeing. Well, you could say, hey, we don't know why your card has been declined, but please call your bank and ask them to accept this transaction. So you can kind of talk to your customers and explain to them what's going on. And that will, educating your customers as to why their transaction will decline will likely convert more sales for you, and will just give your customer a better experience at your checkout. Another thing that you can do, just as a bonus tip, because I always love to give those bonus tips, is if they don't, if they decline and they're not willing to try another card or whatever the case is, offer an alternative payment method. So for example, ACH in the US, in the UK, it can be, different types of debit. It could be SEPA payments in Europe and so forth. So just make sure you cover all your bases. And, if somebody really wants to buy, make sure you try to convert them and give them what they're looking for. So that is my quick checkout page episode. Just quick tips. Like I said, these are super simple for you guys to implement. Doesn't really cost you very much money, and you can just put them in there and, you'll see a couple of hundred, if not a couple of $1,000s in savings every month just from unnecessary fees and losing sales for no reason. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like it if you do. Please share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more content, and have yourself a great day.